What is up, players? It's War Boss Tay up in this mug. Today we're going to be painting up an Ogor Mawtribes Ironblaster, and I'm doing them up here, you can see, in sub-assemblies. This is the main part, the chassis, the actual cart of the Ironblaster, attached to the Rhinox at the front with one of the two big curved bone thingies glued to it. That is so that you could put the driver here on the top when it's done. The last thing we're going to do, of course, is to glue it, but we have to paint all of the individual components separately. Then we would slot in the cannon, make sure it lines up to the driver, then attach the other side to close the loop, and finally we would put this iron piece right on top to cover the seams. This is a great kit to paint, and the last time I painted it, I painted one, you might have seen, I did a Ogor Mawtribes video series in June. And I built the entire thing up. I didn't want to do it in sub-assemblies. And you know what? Doing that was more difficult because it's hard to get your brush into the places that it needs to go. And even though you can hide a lot of it with some washes and just making sure that, you know, you always hold the model a certain way, you're always going to know that if anyone holds your model at a strange angle, it's not going to be fitted correctly. They're not going to see the effect of a fully painted model. So I decided to go back to my roots. I did a video on an Ogre Ironblaster back before there were Ogre Kingdoms and not Ogre Mawtribes in Warhammer Fantasy. This was around a decade ago, and I did it in more sub-assemblies than this. Like, I actually had the Rhinox off of it. I didn't glue it to the base. I had a bunch of different pieces, like the treasure chest separate, and I had both of the bone things detached. So this is the more streamlined and the more effective way of doing it, I believe. You keep one of these bone things off so that you can slot the cannon in, keep that big iron piece off. Of course, have the cannon separate so you can get to all the angles, and the driver as well, so that you can get to all, like the lower half of the driver is what I had the most difficulty painting when I had the model all built up. So there you go. If you want to get your model painted as effectively as possible while also keeping the model in as few sub-assemblies as possible, this is the way to do it. Now, the first color I'm going to be painting is Balthazar Gold, and we're going to be working with this makeup brush. I found that using a makeup brush or a larger dry brush for a lot of these areas, because there's so much surface area on this cannon that's going to be the same color. So using a regular paintbrush with this uneven surface is just going to mess up my bristles. But here, I got a super cheap makeup brush. I got it for only like a couple of bucks, just to have something with the ability to lay down a lot of color in as little time as possible. If I wanted to be more effective, I would probably put this on a pin and attach that to some putty on a cork handle. As it is, I'm just like holding it from the barrel tip and moving the brush around. Of course, it's totally fine. You do whatever you want to do. And at the end of this, you might have seen from the beginning of the video, I haven't really gotten to the washes yet. I feel like this is a good point to get after one painting session. Like, look, it's going to take you an hour and a half to get to where I was, and I'm not cutting out any steps in the process. I'm showing you every single brush stroke. I'm not speeding it up. It's not a time lapse. This is all in real time, so you can paint your miniature as I'm painting it, or just work on something else and maybe come back and look at what I'm doing and how I'm getting along. At the beginning of this video, everything was just primed, and at the end of the hour and a half, you're going to see all of the base coats, pretty much all of the base coats down, ready for washes, and then it's just downhill from here, because once the washes go on and once those are dried, everything is just picking out the details and highlighting the raised areas. It's going to be so much easier. A good thing also with doing it in this order, having the sub-assemblies off, is that you can really get to dry brush the fur on the back of the Rhinox. And you can reach the legs and the head effectively if you have it all glued together in one piece, but having the ability to get to the back of, like the top of the back of the Rhinox is really good. So I'm using Eshin Gray now and using the same technique with this makeup brush. Another thing about makeup brushes too that make them really effective is that they have such a big area for the bristles that you get so much coverage with your paint, and because there's so many bristles, they don't clump up the paint on any one area because there's so many bristles moving the paint around. That's why they're so good at dry brushing. That's why you can get so much done. Eshin Gray is a great base color for fur for animals because it is not flat gray. It's gray with a bit of brown inside of it. And then you just build that up with the Skaven colors like Skaven Blight Dinge, Storm Vermin Fur, and you're gonna get a really nice natural looking fur color. And I apologize for these little segments where nothing is happening. Usually it means I'm looking for colors, putting them onto my wet palette next to the camera, and making sure I have everything I need for the next segment. I'm gonna try to cut out these little pause sections, but I know that when I first got into making these videos, as we move on to Rakarth Flesh, Rakarth Flesh is the big prominent color for the bone pieces here. When I first got into making videos, I saw a lot of YouTube videos for painting guides that would skip the step of actually like the time it takes for a certain area to dry. So I was a very impatient painter when I got back into the Warhammer hobby. When I would look up guides on how to paint up night goblins or orcs or whatever, they would show you a step. If you go, if you go to the Warhammer YouTube page right now, the Games Workshop YouTube page with all of their guides, they show you a step, and while they're doing that step, they jump onto the next one. And I think if you're a new painter, you don't know that paint has to dry before you move on to the next step, unless you're doing wet blending. It's so important for you to give your paint the amount it needs to dry. Otherwise, the next time you put on a paint, especially a wash, it's going to really ruin the layer that you spent so much time on underneath. That's another good reason why it's good to do sub-assemblies like this. Because as something is drying, you're moving on to the next thing while that first piece you did is drying, saving time and saving headache. You can also see everything a lot better. By that, what I mean is, if you look at my videos from June when I painted up the Ogor Mawtribes Ironblaster, I said you have to really take your time. There's so many details on this kit, and when you have it all sitting together, all glued together with so little space to angle things and turn things around, you're gonna miss detail a lot. I did. I missed bits of metal, hooks, little tabs, chains. There's so many things I missed because I had everything glued in front of me. It was very overwhelming to look at completely straight on. When you have it like this and you can look at each piece, you could turn it individually in your hand. You can see, okay, I know exactly how much metal, little metal plates are on this part of the figure. So say I'm starting here by painting the front half of the Ironblaster, right? I've got the Rhinox, these bone things. I can choose to move on to this big tusk at the back of the wagon because it's also in bone, but I'm focusing my efforts on, okay, how many bone pieces are there on the front of this model? You got these two big curvy bone things, but you've also got all the bone, the teeth, and little spikes sticking out of the Rhinox. When everything's glued together, if the driver is on top of the wagon, the cannon is kind of covering the driver and the Rhinox, and you've got the other bone piece closing everything off, it's hard to see all the details that you need to get around to painting. Mournfang Brown is the next huge surface area. It is going to be the color, the base color of our wagon itself. And I just love, see, you're never going to see this if you don't know what it is, because it just looks like some wheels on a big plank of wood that the ogre is standing on, but it's actually a door. And you can paint the door hinges and you can see the keyhole, which we're gonna get to. I love these little details in the Ironblaster kit. Like, you can tell somebody was really putting a bunch of Easter eggs in the design of this, because there are some things, like under one of these wheels, which I glued on, is a chaos star that got bolted into place to bind the wood together. And you're not going to see it because it's completely covered by the wheel. And the wheels are funny too, because they're just a bunch of millstones chained together. Like, they're the Ogor Mawtribes is like the Ogre Kingdoms, rather. It was such a creatively done range. Now, if you really want to get into the wood underneath the barrels there, or in the back of the wagon, then you can leave a couple of those pieces off and you can really get the angle on. Maybe even don't glue the wheels on just yet. Have the wagon standing on its own if you're going to glue the mount to the base, and then just glue the wheels on at the end if you really want to get into it. But I thought, you know what, the wheel housing, I'll get to it as much as I can with whatever brush I'm using, and if I need to cover it up with washes or anything, it's okay. It's a minor part of the model to look at. This is still the most satisfying way to build and paint the Ironblaster, and I stand by that. There's no other way. When I was working through this video, I was like, I wonder if I should have kept some things off, but no, this is the most satisfying way to build and paint the Ironblaster. So because we're going to all the wood, it's all these barrels, the wood frame, all the different things that are like hanging off of the wagon that is in wood. And the important thing to keep in mind too when you're doing this section is that everything can be painted over. There's nothing at this point, because we're just laying down base colors, there's nothing you do if you get some of this Mournfang brown onto the wooden bone or onto the back of the Rhinox. It doesn't matter. Everything can be cleaned up, and usually any mistakes that you make at this point are just going to be covered up by something else's base color. Now we're moving on to this big iron jaw piece that's going to hang over the cannon. I decided to go with Rune Lord Brass. I was looking at the colors, the official colors of the box art, which I try to mimic as much as possible. And it looks like a dark, rusted, reddish brown. I think Rune Lord Brass is a close fit that is also going to look good without putting too much work into the tarnishing. I think in the official Games Workshop version, there's a lot of extra technical steps to tarnish this wood, or not this wood, this metal. I think before I've done it in just straight silver with an Agrax Earthshade wash over it. And it came out okay, but I think this way, this Rune Lord Brass is such a beautiful color also that I'm going to really have more success when I wash this with some Agrax Earthshade and some Nuln Oil. At this point, I think I remember looking at the model and thinking there's so many different areas that need to be colored in different colors. And using Leadbelcher here, I'm going to try to hit the majority of the silver parts. And if you look, just look at that big bone piece. There is so much to it. You've got the like bindings or wrappings. You've got all of these metal plates that are bolted onto it. And off of the plates, you've got hooks hanging. You've got little like bits of stone there at the bottom. All these iron bindings that wrap around the bone itself, the tusk. So the way to approach a model like this is like the old saying, how do you eat an elephant? Right? You just one bite at a time. So instead of looking at painting the entirety, like the silver on the entirety of the model, I'm breaking it up in my mind and only thinking about the silver on this tusk, on the right tusk, not even both tusks. I'm looking at just this one piece, ignoring everything else on the model. I'm saying, okay, I know by the time I finish this one area, I've got these bindings that go around the tusk. I've got little plates bolted onto it to hide like holes or cracks or whatever. And then I've got the hooks that are hanging off as well. So that way your brain can mentally attach a plan to tackling every single component of this model without getting overwhelmed. That's the one thing. I don't want you to get overwhelmed as a painter, especially when you take on a project like one of these centerpiece models. There's so much that can overwhelm you to the point where you just end up putting this onto your pile of shame and you don't even look at it, or even worse, you bring it out but you don't do anything to paint it. You just bring it out to play with and then you put it away. I don't know what's worse, playing with a half painted or unpainted model just because you don't want to create the roadmap to getting from start to finish, or not even playing with it, just having it in your pile of shame because it looked cool in the magazine and in the online articles and on Twitter. You wanted to paint it, and then when you finally got around to it, you bought it, but after assembling it, it just looked like too much. It looked too overwhelming to you, so it just ended up in your pile of shame. My whole YouTube channel, the whole philosophy of my YouTube channel is that you can paint everything you buy. There's nothing that you cannot paint. Like everything is possible. So I'm going to show you the high tabletop quality that you can get by just having a roadmap and following the directions. You might have noticed in a couple of my recent videos, I'm really kind of pushing and promoting this painting journal that I developed, and I'm going to link that below in the description, as well as everything else like the Drybrush set I'm using. And even if you want to get this model for yourself, I'll attach a link to the Ogor Mawtribes Vanguard, which is the best way to get this model, I believe, because it comes in such a great deal with getting 6 Gluttons, 4 Lead Belchers, the Tyrant, and 2 Mournfang Cavalry. Like, getting this model on top of that is such a good savings that I think that's the way to do it. But the painting journal is what I'm using to really chart out a checklist of everything I need to do. So by all means, I want you to follow my videos to see how it actually looks in execution. But the plan that I always make in my painting journal is just a bullet point list. And mine looked like this. Balthazar Gold for the cannon, which I did. Eshin Gray for the Rhinox. Then Bone Color Rakarth Flesh. Then Mournfang Brown for the wagon. And then Lead Belcher for the silver out this tusk. And then I just break down Lead Belcher here, here, here on the model. And you know what? You're not going to follow your roadmap all the time. You're going to want to take some detours, and you see some interesting things you might not have thought about. You're going to want to attack that, and that's totally fine. You can always go off on a tangent, do a little bit more or extra. Like if I'm really feeling how this big bone piece is going, I'm going to instead of moving on to the rest of the wagon, I'm going to want to do the wrappings. I'm going to want to give it a wash. Like whatever's going to mentally make you feel like you're making strides and progress. That's what I want you to do. I want you to have that feeling of accomplishment every time you finish a section of this model, until at the very end, you're going to have so much accomplishment, such a feeling of satisfaction when you look at the entire model glued together. That's the ultimate goal, right? But to get to that big win, to eat that entire elephant, you have to attach it. You have to attack it rather, one section at a time. Completely finish one section before you move on to the next one. And that way, the more you finish, the more sections you complete, you're going to look back and you're going to say, I've made all this progress. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep going. I think I was just taking my Lead Belcher at this point, and I was like, I remember this one little post having the gun sticking out and a bunch of like gears and metal bits. So I don't know what's wood yet. I'm gonna have to repaint those pieces and paint on the brass color, but A lot of this model is, if you're not following a guide like mine, it's just you take your best intuition, right? And you say, okay, I'm just gonna go forth and give it my best shot. And so what if your colors don't match exactly the box art, if that's what you're going for, you can always use that as a reference, but feel free to take chances. Go and do something different. Find what works for you, and it's gonna keep you painting. That's a philosophy I think is so applicable. Find what works for you. If you fall in love with the box art or what you see on Twitter or the websites and you want to replicate that, that's totally fine. But if you feel like you're not up to the task, for example, every time I think about Lumineth Realm Lords, I think about replicating that cream robe color, Dark Reaper now. And I just get so discouraged because I'm not into the blending or using contrast paints very much. So I don't want to paint Lumineth Realm Lords. But I will paint Ogre Kingdoms all day because I think they're hilarious. I think they're being bigger models. Like you can see, I'm using this Dark Reaper to create like a denim color. Like I want to eventually have this guy looking like he's wearing blue jeans, right? And I think that's hilarious. So because he's a bigger model as well, he's not a human-sized model, the effect is going to show up more. I can do more to practice and work on my painting skills. There's just, this hobby is so great because it allows you to pick and choose what you want to work on and how you want to develop as an artist. If you don't want to do any of this, you just want to play the game, make army lists and play the game and have fun doing that, then of course that's totally an option. But when I came back into the hobby about like 15 years ago now, I really wanted to focus on painting. I wanted my models to look good on the table. When I left the hobby, I was literally playing with metal orcs and goblins and carrying them around in a big like plastic container, and they're just falling around everywhere. The ones that did have paint were all chipped because they just banged around anytime I went anywhere, and I took my container of orcs and goblins with me. Oh boy. I wish somebody could have told me like, hey kid, paint your minis. You're gonna feel so much better. It's true, like you feel so much better when you have a painted army. Everyone is gonna look at it, and when you put it on the table, you're gonna get that respectful nod from your opponent, like, all right, you cared enough about your army to paint at least part of it. If you're working on a new faction, you're not sure how you'll feel playing it, and you're just collecting, you're in the beginning phases, the honeymoon phases, then by all means, don't spend hundreds of hours painting to just get discouraged because you don't like the play style of the army. I forgot it's rubbish day. You might hear the garbage man outside. Okay, I'm using Retributor armor to paint the sides here because a little pop of gold, this bright yellow gold, is a huge help when you're looking at this model, because I can tell right away from looking at it, you're going to see a lot of browns, a lot of grays. There's not going to be too much color, so I'm going to add the color where I can. Like in the bits of the back, there's like a green wreath hanging off of the back part of the wagon there. You've got like an imperial shield that's been bolted onto the wagon. So those I'm going to use my color on, but I want to find different places where I can make the miniature pop out. And Retributor armor is such a blindingly bright gold color. I really enjoy painting, you guys, and I love sharing my hobby with you, but I also want to help you with whatever you're working on. So leave me a comment down below, let me know what you're working on, how it's going for you, if there's any way that I can help you to get over any hurdles you've got. Maybe you don't have any problems at all, or you're figuring it out for yourself, and that is totally fine. In fact, when we were all getting back into the hobby at the beginning of the 2000s and in the 2010s, there wasn't a lot of resources for us online. So a lot of us used articles with pictures, and the articles off of the White Dwarf Masterclass articles. They were good, but there's just something about seeing the actual process of painting that I think is what draws a lot of people to videos like mine, where you get to see exactly how I paint a certain piece of a model. You're not just like reading, okay, then apply Leadbelcher to these bits, and then you see a picture of it already completely done. You know what I mean? So basically what I'm saying is, I hope you enjoy my videos. I hope you get something out of it. I hope you learn something that's going to help you on your painting journey. But if there's something specific that's bugging you, I was in your place. I wanted to know how to paint certain things, and I wasn't getting any responses, or I wasn't finding the resources that I wanted. And sometimes talking to people in your local community, like, hey, how do you get this burn effect? Or how do you get the effect of the color transitioning from this to this? Sometimes they talk down to you, sometimes you don't have a very good community, and sometimes you just don't have a community. I had the best community when I was in Hawaii. When I lived there, my local gaming community was so helpful, and some people don't have that. So I want to extend that to you. Just leave a comment down below, let me know if you need help on anything, and we can get a discussion going. We can go over to Discord. You can show me pictures of whatever you have, but I love to help as much as I can. All right, more Leadbelcher here. These large holes are going to be where the pegs from the main body are going to pop into and secure this piece to the side. So obviously you don't want to cover it with too much paint, but realistically you're not going to see too much of that section, that angle of this piece of the model, because there's it's going to be pressed up against the side of the model. Still, as a completionist now, I want to make sure that everything is painted, and that if somebody for some reason picks up my miniature and holds it just at the right angle where light will bounce off of the side of the miniature and you'll be able to see that none of this was painted, that would make me feel bad. And it just takes a little bit of extra effort to paint these angles on. Like if it was going to take me a whole nother painting session just to get the same effect, yeah, I don't think I would do it. But the fact that I'm just literally turning the piece in my hand, and then I can hit all of the pieces I need to, it's totally fine. Just making sure everything is where it needs to be, getting a little bit more Leadbelcher on my brush, and then applying it to this plate here. You can tell I have a bunch of different brushes that I'm using, and like I started with that huge makeup brush to cover the wide areas. I wouldn't do that with this brush. Even though this is a base coat brush, I wouldn't use this brush on painting like the wagon or the Rhinox, because every brush has its purpose, right? Every tool has its purpose, and these brushes that I'm using to paint detail with, I don't want to use them on big, wider areas. It's going to mess up the bristles and the brush head. More Balthazar gold here. I've decided that I want to carry over the colors from certain elements of this miniature to different parts of it. So Balthazar gold is going to be used on these two caps on either side of the cannon that are meant to attach the big jaw piece to the top of the cannon that's kind of holding it down. So the big cannon and these two little caps are going to be in this Balthazar gold color scheme. It's going to look really nice. Balancing your colors is a huge part of painting your miniatures and getting the finish that you want. If I was just starting out, I might not think that, oh, I should only use Balthazar gold on these three areas. Maybe I would go a little bit wild and paint some of the plates on the side of the bone piece here in Balthazar gold, or maybe I'll give the Rhinox some Balthazar gold chains or little metal studs. When you do that and you spread out your spot color doesn't stay a spot color anymore. It starts to be more of a color integrated into the entire color scheme. So if you look at that, there are some little bright gold square little pieces, bars, and I've done that to add more spot color of that yellowish gold all around the model. So anytime you see those, hanging off. That's going to be that bright gold color, but it's not a lot of places. I'm not using that color on different areas. Leave your spot colors as spot colors. Now I've decided to go with Rhinox hide for all of the straps and all of the belts that are tying the two the two tusks here to the wagon. So you're going to see this Rhinox hide starting on the side and then going across the wagon itself. You can see where it's sitting right behind the knoblar driver, those straps and belts that have been attached to each other to create like a little securing system, little bungee cord system holding these two big bones to the wagon. I love Rhinox hide as a color. It's so close to another dark brown color, Dryad bark, which is a little bit darker, a little bit more brown. There's just a touch of reddish or red and beige to Rhinox hide that I like using it more as a starting color for my dark browns. Contrasts beautifully with the bone and the silver. Now I could probably have left. Sometimes I'm going to be doing some cleanup. You might see me cleaning up different areas of the model, going back and tightening up any stray splotches. Oh, this is when I realized the chaos ring on the nose has glued itself and set itself in a funny position. And I remember when I was putting on that piece and gluing it, I thought, oh, I gotta make sure that I don't turn the model in any odd direction, because this ring is very loose, and if it dries, if my plastic glue dries with it facing a funny angle, it could look bad. But it doesn't really look too bad. It doesn't really look too bad. I'm used to seeing the Chaos Star in the nose of the Rhinox aiming down or aiming forward, but having it aiming up like that is pretty funny, and it really grew on me when I was working on the model. Look at the Balthazar gold cap on this side. It's like a turkey leg. It's so hilarious. I really think like the people who designed the Ogre Kingdoms models when they did their range refresh, the ones who designed this piece and the Thunder Tusk and all of the new plastic kits, I really feel like they were, in my head canon, all the model designers are like dads. And you know how dads have that dad humor? That's why they put him standing on, instead of just having a wagon, that's why they put him on a big door with a keyhole and door hinges on the side. That's why they've got a turkey leg on the cap of the piece there on the side, instead of just having some weird rune or some symbol of the ogres. It's it's a turkey leg. It's great. Okay, now I think I'm just going back and I'm finding a bunch of different areas that need to be silver. There's obviously a lot of little rivets that I didn't get to that are gonna need to be silver as well. But I'm just, at this point, I'm bouncing around. I'm starting to bounce around because I don't want to go back and backtrack too much. Here you can see I'm painting the belts like I mentioned earlier. So I kind of backtracked there. I kind of did an oopsie where I was painting Lead Belcher, right? Remember when I painted Lead Belcher on the front of the model? I decided, I'm going to paint all the Lead Belcher bits on the harness of the Rhinox, and I'll just paint Rhinox hide around it. So that didn't work out. That for my brain to have to go back and individually paint every little section between the silver bars and plates on the side was just not worth it for me. So I decided to paint over all of the silver bits that had a black layer underneath of it. And then I'm just going back over them with the silver once this brown is dried, and I'm just redoing that. So that's a step that I could have saved from the beginning. Instead of only painting the silver bits, I knew I would have to paint the brown of the harness, and I thought, I'll just paint around it. But yeah, hindsight being 2020, if I were to paint another one of these, I would definitely wait to paint the silver bits and paint the brown first. Then I'm taking the excess of that dried bark and just creating some lazy shading on the wooden pieces there that I saw were unpainted. You really don't have to do that. It's just something, it's like, well, I got the paint on my brush anyways, let's fill in some of these gaps. And now I noticed while I was doing that, oh yeah, there are the straps here on the other side tusk thingy. So I'm gonna be painting that dryad bark where the straps are wrapped around that tusk near the top. Again, this is something I would have missed if I had tried to paint this thing completely all put together. But because I'm isolating each piece and I'm looking at them as their own separate miniature, you can see which pieces need to get painted a different way. It's funny, when you've been painting miniatures as long as I have, your brain kind of thinks about the miniature that you're working on, breaking it into segments and looking at what you need to base coat, right? Like all the different pieces you need to base coat. My brain identifies, okay, so these are straps, that has to be a dark color to contrast the lightness of the bone color. And it's just something you get used to in time. So your brain trains itself to find these different tricks of color theory and color composition. It's not really something you can learn unless you just study only, like looking at different art books. I mean, you could do that. You can go to art classes and study color theory and color composition. But for me, as somebody who's kind of self-taught as a miniature painter, this is one of the most fun things to do. Like, look at the miniature. I don't know what I'm going to be coloring this little Noblar's outfit to be, and like how I'm going to do his skin. Every time I work on it, it's really going to be a different color scheme every time, because each one has to match the piece that I'm working on at the time. And so while I'm looking at this figure, I think, you know what, this needs a little pop of blue, but not just like a bright Calidor sky of, you know, kind of blue, like a ultramarines kind of blue. I want to make it more of a drab grayish blue. It's going to match nicely with the bluish gray of the denim jeans that the driver's going to be wearing. So yeah, Thunderhawk blue. It's a beautiful color. It might be one of my new favorite colors to paint just because it's so different. It's not really a blue, it's not really a gray. It's a grayish blue, baby. So I'm going to let that dry on our little Noblar there. This is such a great character. One of the things I love most about this is that he's holding, his weapon is basically a signpost. It says Kislev and it's pointing in the direction. And Kislev was a town, a human town in the old world in Warhammer Fantasy, which borders the Empire and the Chaos Wasteland. It's kind of like the Glass Great City before the untamed wilds of the Chaos North. And the fact that they've included it as like a little Easter egg, because who's going to read this little guy's prodder saying Kislev? It's just a hidden detail that I love about this model. All right, and while I was talking, I did get some Retributor armor onto the little Chaos Star nose piercing for our Rhinox. I'm also looking, where else can I put this Retributor armor gold color? It's a bright pop of gold. You can see there, I got some tags hanging off of the tusk piece. So I'm also going to look for just little places where I could plant this color. It's not going to be too distracting or noticeable, but just something as a little something to draw the eye when you're looking at this figure. I do believe there are more tags hanging off of the driver's waist. All right, now here's one of my favorite parts, painting on this little skin that's draped over the cannon. What a ridiculous little extra detail. I'm painting it in XV88. The goal is to paint it up like a little jungle cat and then maybe even add some tiger stripes later. We'll see. I think just painting it in this color does so much. It like immediately brings out the character of this fur pelt just draped over the cannon. Yeah, once you paint this detail on, it's really going to change things for you, because it's got that Balthazar gold that kind of got dry brushed from when I was working on the cannon, and now with this, it really brings this piece to life even more. I think my favorite part about painting the cannon is adding this detail, the pelt, and then also after the washes, after you've highlighted it up, painting on all the blue-green verdigris to go into the cracks. I think it really elevates this part of the model, and it's the thing that draws the eye the most when you're looking at the Ironblaster from across the table. You just see this giant honking cannon, right? So the more detail you can put into it, the better first impression you're going to give yourself. So I'm holding this XV88 and I'm thinking, what else can I paint to have it match and also bring the model together a little bit? So I've decided here on the right side, there's a little hanging noose. You can either do a noose, or I think the instructions also say you could do some hooks, some giant meat hooks. And I did meat hooks for the Ironblaster I painted in June. So this time I wanted to do something a little bit different. I decided to go with the noose, and we're going to be using XV88 as a color for all of our rope. Not just this noose, but there's some other rope bits on this model that I think will look really nice. And as I look at this model from this position, going on to Lead Belcher, looking for some more silver bits that I might have missed earlier, I'm really finding the joy of painting. I remember sitting, when I was recording this video, sitting at the table, getting this Lead Belcher paint on now and working at more of the details, the extra hidden details to the model that you might not normally see, like the plates bolted onto the wooden frame and everything. The joy of painting is really something you need to hold on to. When you find it, when it grabs a hold of you, as long as you're not painting, you know, and wearing yourself down and killing yourself to be more efficient than anything else. I mean, you might find joy in being as efficient as possible and painting as quickly as possible. But there is a balance that I found between speed, efficiency, and allowing your creativity to just take the reins and go wherever it wants to. One of the perks of being a miniature painter is knowing that you have this entire palette, this three-dimensional palette to work on, and it's yours. You could do whatever you want with it. You could paint these spikes on the side. You could paint it in gold. It doesn't have to be in silver. You can make your Navlar color, make his skin pink if you want to. It's really up to you to bring your vision to life. And at the end of the day, nobody else is painting your model but you. So you do what you want, make it look great, make it pop and sing, and do all the things that you can imagine in your head the model is going to look when it's coming together. And I just cannot wait until I'm finished with painting this miniature and I can start gluing all the pieces together. When I did my Skaven Doom wheel, and when I did this Ironblaster project back in Hawaii like 10 years ago, that was really one of my favorite parts of the whole process, is putting the sub-assemblies together, hitting them with that glue and pressing the pieces together. It's what I loved about painting the Mortis engine, everything I did on camera back in Hawaii when I used to live at home, those big projects. Like I keep thinking of the Skaven Doom wheel, and that Mortis engine with all of the different elements to it. I love doing sub-assemblies, painting them up separately, having your brain digest every single section, and then finally putting them all together. So this is a piece that I missed painting in June when I was working on my previous Ironblaster, because once you have the driver glued down onto this, you cannot reach this detail to paint the silver on the door. And I think it's such a great, visually interesting piece to look at. I love it so much, and the fact that you can't see it, this and the Chaos Star in the wheelhouse, it makes me happy to know that it's there, but like the fact that not everyone knows about it is it's so interesting to me. If you're not an Ogre player, and it's just so interesting. And it reminds me of, like, if orcs and goblins, or orcs for Warhammer 40k, if they had more of that little detail, like the Ludas, if they had their guns and everything have more like Imperial influence, or you can see that they were scrapped together from Tau guns, and you can pick out and point out, oh, this is part of a railgun. Oh, that's part of an autocannon. Oh, that's a las cannon bit. I think there's a little bit of that in the current design, but I think even more so, if you check out the Artel W Ludas, their version of Ludas, you can mix and match and build your own giant looted snaz gun, and there's a lot of that like hidden in plain sight influence. But yeah, that's what I love about these Ogor Mawtribes miniatures. Back when they were Ogre Kingdoms, this was such an innovative piece. And you don't have, that's the thing about it, you don't have to glue on this back giant tusk with all the helmets hanging from it. You don't have to do the, you don't have to glue the shield on the back. You don't have to glue the treasure chest on. If you want to just make a really bare bones wagon, just get this thing painted up as soon as possible, then these pieces are not, there's no like gaps in the model. You know what I mean? Where there's no grooves or depressions where these pieces are supposed to go. Literally, when you are looking at the instructions and putting this thing together, you are sticking it on and pressing it to the existing frame. You're just putting it all on, adding it onto it. I think like the post with the gun and with the lantern hanging onto it, those have little depressions and gaps for you to put those pieces in. But like literally this giant tusk in the back, the shield, the treasure chest. There's even things that I didn't glue on, like there's a giant hammer, like a two-handed hammer that the driver can pick up and use to start pounding heads. If anybody gets too close, but I decided I wanted to not have that, to make the wagon give it more space, because they're so crowded with detail right now. And all of the Ironblasters I've painted in the past have that hammer sticking to it. So there are some pieces I decided I didn't want to add just because I want you to be able to see like every part of this model even more. I love that hammer though, and I love the treasure chest. I love the this big tusk in the back. So I'm going to be taking Leadbelcher. I'm still working with Leadbelcher now. I'm picking out all of the different areas where this silver paint is going to be, and I've got the barrels. There are the rims on the barrels in the back for holding the gunpowder, and the cannonballs there you can see on both sides. I think this is also the time when I'm going to be painting the silver of the chest. So getting technical, again, the trickiest areas to paint this silver Leadbelcher paint to would be the chains on the wheels. I think the rims of the barrels, you're gonna have to go back and clean those up. And there are a multitude of little rivets and bolts sticking out of different areas that are not attached to like metal plates. And you're gonna have to individually paint those little rivets one by one, which I don't mind. Just get yourself a detail brush and go at it, and have some music playing or something that can distract your brain, just because there are so many mind-numbing little details to this miniature. And the more you paint it, the more you see, the more you have to go back and fix, the more you find something else. There's just a lot going on in this miniature. With this silver, while I was painting the chains onto the tires, I started making some pretty careless mistakes. I think it was at this point that I was really tired, burnt out. I'm finding my groove to paint. The time for me that works now is like very late at night after my lady boss goes to bed. She's with the babies. I'm able to sneak away to get some painting in. That's also when I film these videos. And I am just having to work my body as far as I can take it without, being unhealthy. I really want to produce good content for you guys, quality content, and I remember the Ironblaster being a project that I particularly enjoyed. So I said, I gotta film myself painting this. I gotta post up how I did it, and just take you through my process, but also give you something to listen to and hang out with while you work on whatever you're working on. Because I'm sure not all 14,000 of you that are my subscribers out there, and the millions of you who watch my videos who aren't subscribed, wonk wonk, you're not all painting Ogor Mawtribes Ironblasters. You're all painting and working on your own thing. But these techniques I'm teaching you, I really hope you can use them. Take them to heart and find some other application for them, or just enjoy hanging out. Originally, my tutorials were just meant to play in your background while you work on your miniatures or do whatever you're doing, and just for you to be able to peek your head up and look at what point I'm at with my model and give you that inspiration that, hey, if I can take this primed, unpainted miniature in sub-assemblies all the way up to the wash phase by the end of the video, then, you know, anything's possible. There it is. Anything is possible. You don't have to defeat yourself and say like, I got this as an impulse buy, I'm never gonna paint it. That's the worst thing, guys and gals. As I work on painting the iron plates on this cannon, you have to know that that is an excuse that we make. I don't have time to paint. That's an excuse. That's a crutch that our brain latches onto, because there is a time. We all have the same 24 hours in a day, right? And we all need sleep. We all need to rest. We all need to have ourselves engaged in things that bring us enjoyment. And if you can manage your time and say like, okay, I really want to paint tonight, so maybe I won't binge the first half of Cobra Kai on Netflix with my lady boss. Maybe I'll tell her, hey, I'm gonna go work and do this, try to get this stuff painted so I don't have such a big pile of shame. And or maybe there's another time in the day where you're just sitting around twiddling your thumbs, or like your video game time. We all put value on our free time, right? Because our free time is so limited, and as we get older, it just gets less and less, and we get more and more diminished as our attention is drawn to our families, our careers, our real life. And when we were kids, when we were painting this stuff when we were kids, and we didn't have mortgages and spouses and children to pick up and dinners to get ready, we had all the time in the world to paint, you know? And this is now just a time where we have to be intelligent, and we have to think about how we spend that limited resource that we're never getting back. Personally, I think this is a great way to do it. And I love being able to chart it on YouTube. And I can say like, look, this is the point of my life. I can look back on my video history and I can say, look what I was doing at this time in my life with everything else I had going on. I carved out time to paint an Ironblaster, put it up on YouTube for you guys. I think it's really special. And no matter what you're painting on, no matter what you're working on, there's a way to get to the end that you can be happy with. And like, I'd love to help you get there. So there we go, some more little tags to paint in Retributor armor. And bright garish gold. All right, you might be wondering, why did I paint that entire treasure chest in silver? Because with the angles that the treasure chest is at, it's going to be easier for me to paint the red areas inside of the silver than to paint it all in red and then to try to pick out the silver details. It's a little bit of a reverse way to paint rather than painting the main part and then the trim. I'm hitting the trim first everywhere, and then I'm going to be using a detail brush to block in the color inside of it. It's a bold plan, Cotton. We'll see if it works out. Okay, now we're moving on to Rakarth Flesh. Again, I think this is one I've noticed, yeah, I've got some Mournfang Brown spattered on the side of the tusk. And I'm looking up the length of the tusk, and you can see I didn't get that that Rakarth Flesh everywhere I wanted it to go. So I really am trying to fix some mistakes before I move on. You don't have to do this. You can get to the wash phase before you start fixing, but I always think if it's really that much of an issue that it's gonna get at you and pick at the back of your brain, then why not do it? It only takes a second. Pop open the color pot of whatever you're working on and just clean it up. Now, when you're doing any kind of cleaning, going back to tighten up any mistakes or to paint over any stray brush strokes, you want to make sure that you don't go too far down the path of going backwards. You want to always be moving forward, moving ahead, making progress, so that you don't get stuck in a rut or in a never-ending feedback loop of trying to, say paint one of these little silver bits of metal, and the silver gets onto the wood. So you got to go back and you got to fix the wood. But as you're fixing the wood, some more of that wood color gets on the metal, and you don't want to keep going back and forth like that. It's going to burn you out. You're going to feel a lot of just feelings of dejection, and your motivation is going to sap. So always be moving forward, go straight ahead. And that way you're going to keep making progress, and any mistakes that you make can be cleaned up during the washes and the highlight section. So all we're doing really is we're blocking out colors. We don't want anything to be gray unless it's a really conscious decision to make something gray, like the fur on the Rhinox, for example. Everything else, we want to have some kind of color on it, so we know this might not be the final color. For example, if we use some washes, this bone color for the tusks are going to turn really yellowish, which is what we want. It's going to look like aged ivory. We want it to look really sepia toned, and that way when we attack it with the highlights, it's going to look really, really nice. It's going to create a beautiful contrast. So continuing to clean with whatever I have left on my brush here, adding some silver to, I see some like links and rivets and little bits of silver that can be picked out. At this point, I think I'd walked away for a little bit, let the paint dry. So even if you walk away for maybe like half an hour to an hour, get yourself a drink, stretch your legs, take a walk. By the time you come back, something like the Rhinox hide straps with all the silver on it, it should be dry, ready for you to paint even more on. Who are you calling a moron? And the most important thing is to get through this base coat phase. This is the grind right here, where you're picking out every individual detail on this model that's been like brilliantly sculpted and crafted and put together for you, and you're putting some paint on it. And once that paint is dry, you can hit it with the washes, and that's where we're really going to see the depth coming out. It's going to create all those beautiful shadows in the recesses, all that stuff that we like. But for now, it's more a question of, okay, where are all these skulls? Did I get all the skulls? Am I missing any skulls? And what about all these little silver rivets? I'm gonna have to paint all of those. This is such a great model. And also, if you're a new painter or you are not really comfortable or confident in your skills yet, I love the Ogor Mawtribes range because they are bigger scale. You can really practice with skin tones, flesh tones. You can practice painting faces, eyeballs, and teeth and all of that. Because they're larger models, you're going to be able to really get that practice in before you go onto a regular, quote-unquote, normal human-sized miniature. Like if you really want to do Cities of Sigmar or the dwarves or any of the various elven races, they've all got eyeballs, they've all got faces, and a lot of them are very narrow and thin or hidden by a large helmet that's hanging over their brow. I think I'm going back in with some XV88 to the rope that's tied around this post. So practice on your Ogor Mawtribes, even if it's not a big model like this, centerpiece Ironblaster here. You can just go onto eBay and find like one single ogre glutton, and I think you can get one for me like $5 or $6 and have it shipped to you. Just glue them together and practice your faces. I don't know what it's called, but I think like if you're an artist or if you're going to an art academy and they tell you just have a sketchbook, right? And when you're around town, when you're not at school, just sketch whatever you see. Get that practice going. Find the rhythm of getting your lines down and getting more confident in putting pen to paper. Well, the same case is true for your ogres, or for any model that you paint, any army that you collect. If it's your first army or your 10th, it doesn't matter. All the fundamentals always stay the same. You prime, you base coat, you get through the base coat phase as fast as you can so you can move on to the washes and then the final highlights. That's where the models really come alive. It's mentally very taxing to have to paint your base coats and then clean. Like here, I've got some of that Mornfang brown onto the gray millstone, so I'm cleaning it up with Mechanica Standard Gray. Very simple, very easy to do. In fact, while I'm working on something else, I think I've seen that the Mornfang brown had spattered onto the wheel, and all this time I've been putting it off. I've been setting it to the back of my mind, like, oh yeah, I gotta do that. I gotta do that. At some point, your brain is gonna say, now is the time. Now's the time to clean it up. Get to it. And you have to listen to it. Because guess what? If I left that Mornfang brown there on the wheel, if I just said, I'm going to put it off for a little longer, I'm going to work on more of these other details, then it would continue to nag and it would continue to bother you. And you don't want to do that. You want to clear the decks as much as possible. I've been thinking about that analogy, that metaphor, that you're getting in a paint job like this, or any kind of paint job, doesn't matter what you're painting. You've got your steps, right? From beginning, when you first prime the model, all the way through the base coats, the shades, the highlights, the basing. It's a step-by-step process. Even though your brain might not be wrapped around exactly what the colors are at the beginning, you know what has to be done. I gotta dry brush the fur on this Rhinox. I gotta dry brush some wood after I do my washes. I gotta pick out the colors and make this thing really pop, especially with the two tusks. Basically what I want to say is that every painting project, everything you ever paint is going to be a whole process, right? There's a whole step-by-step process you have to go through, and it just gets more complex the bigger the model is, the more details there are. Say, like painting a regular ogre glutton is nothing compared to painting like a Death Corps of Krieg army. And it's nothing technically similar, but the process, the structure of every painting challenge is the same. Everything you ever paint, the structure is always going to stay the same. After you assemble, it's base coat, washes, highlights. So between those steps, you're just making sure anything you see, like right now, I believe I saw the skulls that were hanging off the back tusk piece. I remember putting off in my brain, I hadn't painted the entire tusk of the Rhinox correctly. So I'm attacking the skulls, I'm attacking all of the stray bits of bone that I can find. And in doing that, I'm starting to also notice, oh yeah, there's a feather, there are feathers here, there's that wreath. This whole back section is packed with detail, like the treasure chest, the shield. There's so much to paint here that I really need to devote just a couple minutes to charting it out. Like, what is the color composition going to be on the model if I was to paint a Altdorf colored shield, which is red and blue, versus like a Knights of the White Wolf Middenheim color scheme, which is just blue with some whites and grays. Averland would be black and yellow. Hochland would be green and red. So there's color schemes for every province in the old world, in the Empire. So it's just up to you to decide. Or do you just want to make it like a black shield with a white cross? Just be very plain and simple. And it's not Warhammer Fantasy anyway. It's on a round base, so you would be using this thing for Age of Sigmar. And there's a whole list of cities and towns and colors for each of them that I'm not even familiar with yet. Little details like these 2 plates on the tusks of the Rhinox, they're going to bite you in the butt if you take note of them. If you see them, if you notice them, but you don't do anything about them, just hold it off, keep holding it off. You might forget about them. Then when it comes time to finish the model and you step back after basing it and looking at it and being real proud, then you're going to say, oh shoot, I forgot to paint these metal plates on the tusks. So attack everything. There's a Japanese philosophy of approaching each project as if you were a beginner, wanting to learn, wanting to do your best. No matter if this is, like I said, your first army or your 10th army, the process stays the same. Your excitement, your motivation, your driving impetus to go forward and to keep progressing and to advance all the way from the start to the finish, that is going to be up to you to keep fueling that fire. Eshin Gray now. If you can fuel that fire, that artist's motivation to want to be better, to see your work as a beginner would see their work, with lots of flaws that they can fix, lots of room for improvement, then that is the way that you're going to keep growing and you're going to keep loving what you're doing. This hobby is, I've been posting on YouTube for over 14 years, so that doesn't even count how long I was back in the hobby before I picked up a camera and said I want to actually record what I'm doing. And I've painted so many things, and I've spent so much of my time and my money, my energy, my focus, my free time. I think we've all have, right? Getting back into the hobby, especially those of us who've taken a 10-year break to deal with life and to become fully integrated human beings. As I break out the Rhinox hide and work on some more dark brown bits, we have come back to the hobby so that we can enjoy and rekindle that part of our brain, that part of ourselves that we've missed. There's that saying, right? You can never go home again. Once you leave home, and you leave home as like barely coming out of childhood and into adulthood, and you leave to experience the world, go to school, like get a job, start a family. You can never really go home to your childhood home. And the reason is, it's always been in my mind ever since I was a kid and I heard that for the first time. The reason you can never go home is because home isn't just the place that you go back to. Home is the feeling of family and love and everything being okay, right? When you're home and as a kid, everything is fine. Nothing bad can happen to you. Like you're enjoying your life and you've got your whole life ahead of you. Ooh, Caliban green, time to put a pop of green color. So when we come back to the hobby, just like when you say you can never go home again, you can never go back to your first painted army again. That's like the one-to-one comparison you can make. And like if you started collecting ogres when you were a kid and now you're coming back to it, you're gonna have grown, and your experiences as a person, as a human being, is gonna have grown so that you can really approach your art in that way, and you can add like lots of different subtle tones to your colors. Maybe you were a really bright, cartoony, My Little Pony, rainbow bright guy in your teens, and you're all about color and vibrancy. And then as you dealt with life and you came back 10 years later, maybe now you want to tone it down, and maybe you've had experiences, or the opposite direction. Maybe you started as like a grim dark, two coats of known oil on everything, and maybe now you want to be like bright and vibrant, and you want to bring life and color to your projects. Whatever your story is, that feeling that you can never go home to your first army is, I think it's so poignant, and it's sad and it's heartbreaking because, for some of us, that's why we come back to the hobby. We want to remember what it was like to be kids again. We want to remember what it was like to play this game and to have that childhood wonder and excitement whenever you purchase one of these models and you paint them up. But you can't. It's a whole different thing now, which I think is a double-edged sword, right? It's sad that you can never enjoy it the same way you enjoyed it, but you're enjoying it on a whole nother level now. Now you're approaching it from an artist perspective. And I didn't even talk about, I used Mephiston red on that big feather. I used Caliban green on the wreath, and look at the way the colors are interacting with each other. Now this is the point where I really am going to attack the treasure chest with a very fine tipped brush, and I'm going to use Doombull Brown to really push the color from the center of these panels out to the silver banding without getting all over the silver. This is the way that I would do one of these where I don't have the chest in my hand. I'm holding the entire base for the Ironblaster, and I'm really trying to angle my brush to the point where I can get at all of these angles. If I could hold the treasure chest in my hand, if I hadn't glued it to the model, then I might have just painted the entire thing in Doombo Brown and then picked out the silver. But because I have a very limited range of motion where I can attack this treasure chest, I've decided that starting with silver and then painting in the Doombo Brown is the best way to go about it. Doombo Brown is a beautiful color. It covers so nicely. You do want to thin it down like all paints, especially base color paints, but I believe this is a layer paint. You want to thin it down on your wet palette, and you want to make sure your brush is up to the task. So I've got a link in the description, mentioned it before. I'm going to put a couple of different links. I'll put a link to the Ogor Mawtribes Vanguard, where you could pick up this model along with all of the other models for such a great discount that you're really saving a lot of money on it. I'm also going to put a link to the dry brushes that I used to cover those huge surface areas like the bone, the Rhinox, the chassis. It's going to be a huge help if you add these dry brushes to your set. And I'm also going to include a link to all of the detail brushes that I'm using. And I swear, I use these detail brushes for eyeballs, for painting like the most minute details. They're terrific, and you get a bunch of them. I think you get 10 in a set for like only $10 or something like that. Whatever outrageous price it is, it's well worth it, especially because Games Workshop and a lot of places charge so much for one brush now. I was shopping at my local friendly neighborhood game store, and I thought, okay, I do need to get new paint. I might as well see how much it costs to grab a brush here. And it was like $8 for a Games Workshop brush. Like, your mileage might vary, but I asked the guy, like, why is it so expensive? And then he said it's the Games Workshop brand. It's just the MSRP for the thing. So that's like wild. Can you imagine being like a parent and your kid tells you, I want to play this game, and you know what an investment it is in time and money. It's like, what do you say to that? Probably as long as it's not Necrons. Or, okay, yeah, no Hedonites of Slanesh though. You collect a good army. Not that there's anything wrong with Hedonites of Slanesh, but they're just so hard to paint. There's too much trim. I would say the same thing about Cities of Sigmar or the old school Empire, although Empire is just so much fun to collect and paint on its own. What am I even doing at this point? I think I got the content for this tutorial over the course of like 2 nights. Mornfang Brown now, I wonder what this is for. And it's at some point I had the camera going, right? I had my phone going. I'm working. The lady boss is asleep. The babies are asleep. And I swear, like, I just lose track of time. Like, isn't that such a crazy feeling when you're painting, you're working on something? They used to call this, I used to experience this when I would drive to, I was dating a girl that lived on the other side of the island back when I lived in Hawaii. Like, literally, she lived on the opposite side of the island from where I was on the south side of the island. I had to drive way up to the north side of the island to even see her. And on those drives, like, they're nothing compared to drives now here in California, but back then, where everything took like 15 minutes to get to, these hour stretches of just open road at like midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, I would lose track of time. Like, I would get in my car, I would say goodnight to my girlfriend at the time, and then I remember starting the car, getting on the road, and I would like literally blink my eyes, and I'd be looking around because I'd be sitting in my parents' house in front of my parents' house. I'd be like, how did I get here? I drove here, like I've lost an hour, but I don't remember any of it. I forget what the term for that is, when you just lose track of time while you're driving. Rakarth flesh. Something about like your brain automatically going by muscle memory and doing the things you know you're supposed to do anyways. So like if somebody darted out in front of me on the road and I almost got in a car accident, like my brain would engage again. But they say that when you're dealing with that, it's like your brain is unconsciously just going on its skeleton crew. All right, what are we doing? Rackard flesh for the guy's arm wraps. I believe this is when I'm finally going to get to, yeah, big boy here. So I've got such a simple technique for painting these ogres, and I use it for every single ogre model I have in my collection. So they all usually get a dark bluish colored pants, green, dark red, if I'm feeling fancy. But before I go to the pants, I like to start with the flesh. And I think I meant before I like shade and highlight the pants so that they look more denim-like, because I do remember, yeah, I did paint them Dark Reaper. Okay, so you can see me using the dry brush from the Master Drybrush set, which I've included in a link in the description. Look how quickly I can get through this. So I think if you ever want a positive feeling, like if you're feeling like you're in a rut, you can't focus on painting, you're just not getting it done, what I would love for you to do is buy one of the Ogor Mawtribes Vanguard boxes. Have a unit of 6 ogre gluttons sitting in front of you just for this occasion. Grab one of these dry brushes and like literally look how fast it took me to base the skin on this guy. Like just you can knock through an entire unit of ogres. Just hit the skin, boom, 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 6 times. Then do the denim pants. You can use other colors like Caliban green for the dark green. I don't know if I would use corn red. I don't know if I would use do a red kind of pant, but maybe Doombo brown. It's a nice brownish red color that would look great. It's just such a fun way to make you feel good about painting, about yourself, because you can really just lay down so much color. Whereas if I were to go at this with like a standard size brush, I would have to, slather the paint onto a certain area, spread it around, make sure there's no clumps, make sure it's not thick. With this dry brush set, like I didn't even wipe most of the paint off. I kind of dipped it into the paint and then just slapped it on. And your dry brush, you're just gonna move it all the way around the character, and like a million brush strokes are gonna be distributing that paint everywhere it needs to go. I'm so excited about that product. So check it out. The dry brush set, I think everybody should have one of these dry brushes just for this kind of occasion, where you don't need to get in there with a detail brush. You can really just lay down some paint and get it on as fast as possible so you can move on to the next step. And then you can get technical with the highlights and the shades and all of that. Like really just lay down some color. That's my whole philosophy going into the second half of the year here. Just lay down more color. Stop thinking, stop overanalyzing, like have a roadmap. Use my journal, my painting journal, to create a bullet point list that you can follow, and just put down more paint. Just get the paint on your brush, get the brush on the miniature, and you're gonna realize like, oh, I could have been wasting all this time like thinking about how I was gonna paint the model, and I just did it, and now the model's painted. And sure, it might not be perfect because you're really going as quickly as you can, but you're not gonna have any mistakes. You're gonna make sure you go back, and any of this silver that gets on his chest or his shoulders, you're gonna paint it off. And it's just such a great way to attack any painting project. So we're now gonna hit Castellan Green, and I remember what this is for. This is for the driver. Castellan Green is one of the first colors that I remember painting with. Not Castellan Green, but the old color range equivalent. Back when I painted orcs and goblins, I thought green skins have to be bright, they have to be colorful, they have to be what they tell you to use at the time was like goblin green as a base coat and a highlight for goblins especially. But I remember before washes were invented, when it was just the old color range without washes. Oh boy, I must have painted like over 100 night goblins, and I wanted them all to look like vibrant, bright, neon green. And for their highlights, they would tell you, oh, like add a little bit of yellow to the green. And I thought, okay, so my highlights for them were like yellowish green, and it was so colorful. It was so bright on the eyes. And then I remember Ogre Kingdoms were out, and they were talking about the Noblars, and I looked at the Noblar skin color because they're supposed to be related to orcs and goblins, right? And I looked at the Noblar skin color, and it's this weird muted green, where it's not that cartoony orcs and goblins bright radioactive green. It's like very subtle. The green is very subtly put on the model, and I just fell in love with it. So when the paint colors changed over, I made sure that I had a good knowledge of what the new color was going to be, and now I paint all of my Noblars Castellan green, Agrax Earthshade, then Castellan green Death Guard armor. That's going to be the recipe for those little guys. Steel Legion Drab is the perfect color to paint onto like various bits of wood. I used Mournfang Brown for the wagon because Mournfang Brown is a brighter, more characterful color. It's a reddish brown, whereas Steel Legion Drab is more of a like beige-ish brown. It's more muted, it's subtle, and it's perfect for any kind of weapon or wood accent. I used to use this all the time for my old Death Corps of Krieg Forge World army that had the custom resin bases. I would paint all of the wooden planks Steel Legion Drab, then hit it with the Carrick Stone before you wash it, the Carrick Stone highlight, and then wash it with Agrax Earthshade. It's gonna instantly show you where all of those lines are and all of the wood grain effect. And then you can go back, now that the bright highlight of the Carrick Stone has been muted down and tied to the Steel Legion Drab, you can get that Carrick Stone one more time and very easily pick out those top highlights. All right, Corvus Black now for the boots. I could go with the Abaddon Black, the straight black. And just also a reminder, you don't have to get Abaddon Black for your black paint purposes. There are tubs, buckets of black acrylic paint at your local Walmart in the arts and crafts section. And they are just as good as an acrylic paint. Just squeeze some of that onto your wet palette, thin it down with some water or some medium, and it's just as good as Abaddon Black, if not better, because Abaddon Black comes in a little tiny Games Workshop pot, and you can get these tubes. Like I've got a giant tube of straight black paint that I love to use, and the fact that I use it and it still doesn't feel like it's halfway gone and I've had it for years is just like fantastic. I use it on everything that I need to paint black. Corvus Black is a step up where it's not as bright as Mechanicus Standard Gray. I made the mistake of dry brushing some Iron Hand Space Marines with some Mechanicus Standard Gray, and it looked terrible. It looked like stone. It looked like Word Bearers pre-heresy, pre-Great Crusade era. So now I'm taking that same, I believe that, is this Steel Legion Drab? Yeah, I don't think this is XV88. And I'm painting it around this guy's cannonball bag. So now I'm using the paintbrush because I want to have a little bit more control. And this is also from the paintbrush set that I've got linked in the description. So you can do so many things with these paintbrushes. You can lay down color, you can smooth it out, you can really get into the details, selective highlighting. There's just so much you could do with this set. All right, now we're working on the character, the driver. finding all the different areas of him. I think when I left this video off, when I stepped away from the table finally, the only thing I hadn't painted on this guy was the strip of cloth behind the chainmail on his torso. All right, I'm just cleaning up and evening out some of that silver paint using lead belcher. Not even sure what comes next. I'm a little bit into uncharted territory because, like I said, I had the painter's mind wipe at about this point. Oh, okay, I've got some retributor armor because I found some little tags dropping off of this guy's belt. Little pop of that yellow gold. It's beautiful. I do remember one of the things I did not get at this point because I want to wait until his skin is a little bit more highlighted. There is a lot of shrapnel sticking out of his shoulders, out of his chest, just chunks of iron that looks like they're still sitting in there. They're either freshly added to his person, or they've been there for a while. But I'm going to put the silver in there after I get the Cadian flesh tone highlight on his skin, maybe even after I do a wash of Reikland Flesh Shade. Now I'm using Balthazar Gold to paint the design on his gut plate. I think Balthazar Gold is the perfect color to create like a dark brass, bronzy look. Especially once you put the shades down, it's gonna really pop nicely. Do a little bit of a fine highlight on the edge of that bronze, and it's gonna really sing nicely. There's another little design there on his bracer, so it's gonna get the Balthazar Gold treatment as well. I'm just looking for any other extra places. I think on a previous miniature, I did some bronze by his, like the mandibles of his helmet. I did some of those bits in bronze, but I think this time I'm gonna just keep them all silver. And then when I wash the helmet and then highlight it back up, it's gonna look really cohesive, more so. Xandri Dust next. Xandri Dust is another great color to use for straps, bandages, belts. In this case, what am I using it for? Not too sure. So you can see that we're going for a very brown, gray, bone trifecta of colors, and they should be evenly distributed with spots of accent color like the blue on the driver's vest, of course the green and the red on the back of the Ironblaster, and Cantor blue now. What are we using that for? All right, I think we're finally going to hit the shield. Yep. Use Cantor blue here. This would be a great way to make the shield look like Altdorf. Altdorf's colors are blue and red. No white. That's like an artistic addition that you will have to make. Like if I wanted to add a little bit of white to the border of the cross there, and it'll be red, white, and blue. Yeah, I believe that was the only thing that could be painted in Cantor blue. Everything else is going to be cohesive with the Ogor Mawtribes colors. All right, look at this. I mean, from where we started this video to here, it's an achievement. There was a lot of detail. There's a lot of details on the this model that we got to. Surprisingly, I didn't go crazy. I went all the way from the primer to here, I'm pretty proud of myself. So I'm just doing some little cleanup that my brain at this point is realizing I don't have the bandwidth to do much else. So I'm just picking out some silver here and there. Where is there some silver that I can paint up? There's a little bit there on the end of his spear. All right. I love looking at that skin on the cannon on the right there. It's really terrific. Okay, so at this point I've decided I'm gonna go with blue and yellow for my colors for my shield. Blue and yellow is in universe, I believe that is Nordland, and it's the colors of their navy. If you want to make it Marienburg colors, then you would add a little bit of red in there. Maybe I will, maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll add a little bit of red. But I do not like to paint yellow straight out of the pot onto even primered surfaces. I feel like they spread out too thin too quickly. But if you started with the XV88 and then you hit it with the Averland Sunset, you'll get a nice yellow that is solid that you can build on even after the washes. So look at that, we got this far in an hour and a half. So proud, and I hope you got a lot done for the last hour and a half. Let me know in the comments, what are you working on? And if you want to show it to me, then join the Discord. Put some pictures in the work in progress section. Join me for part 2 of the video. Thanks for watching, players.